It's 1:30 p.m. in Lagos, same time in London and in Accra, Ghana. We're bringing you market insights and analysis on Business Incorporated live from Channels Television. Yes, what's coming up on the program. Zambia moves to halt its currency fall. And Ghana to assist Sao Tome with its post operations. And Uganda moves to edge out Kenya in new petroleum import proposal. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Will Ibong. Let's kick off with market numbers from Africa, where equities were trading with mostly positive sentiments at intraday. We've seen, let's check out the markets now with Nigeria. The NGX is up 0.32%, more than a third of a percent at intraday. Very good for the markets. Probably going to close in the green today. So South Africa is also up 0.44%. Let's look at the EGX30 in Egypt, shall we? It's up marginally, 0.02% intraday, while Kenya closed Friday's session in the red. Now let's move on to the Middle East. We see major equities there trading with mixed sentiments, or mixed, mostly positive sentiments. It's Abu Dhabi up 0.37%. Dubai, however, is also up 0.36%. Let's see the other markets in the region. Saudi, 0.17% down, and the Qatari index, 1.57% up. But let's now check out what's happening in the UK. We see the British Steel is planning to close down its blast furnace, and that's going to put about 2,000 jobs at risk. Juliana Olainka, our correspondent, that joins me to discuss this. Juliana, good afternoon. This is quite a bummer for a Monday, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not great news. Good afternoon, Will. For the thousands of employees that work for British Steel in Scunthorpe, it's part of a much wider discussion between British Steel, which is owned by China's Yingye Group, and the sector's transition to net zero. So it's not just British Steel that have been transitioning. Also Tata, which is one of their rivals, they've also been going through this transition stage, which unfortunately will mean that jobs will have to go. So they have made an announcement with regards to blast furnaces in Scunthorpe. So they have quite a large factory there. And what they want to do is that they want to stop using these blast furnaces, which apparently emit more emissions and is more man-intensive heavy. They want to reduce the amount of manpower they have working within these sites, and also change the way they're burning steel. That's basically the plan, and in fact it does actually have the full backing of the British government. I believe the Department for Business and Energy are going to be supporting this transition with £500 million. So jobs will go, not straight away, so jobs are still going to be kept for Christmas, but I do believe they plan a total reconstruction to be finished by 2027. So yes, it's not great news, but of course we know, especially as we're coming up to COP in the next couple of weeks, Britain are trying to be the leader when it comes to being clean and green. And the steel manufacturing business in the UK is heavily pollutant, which is why the government are assisting these two big firms in their transition phase, which does mean, unfortunately, that jobs will go.
Yeah, unfortunately, net zero is seeming to become pocket zero, Juliana. So tell us now, we see Ryanair, the profits surging, for the quarter. This is like an early Christmas gift for that air company.
Absolutely. Ryanair have just reported extraordinary numbers for shareholders this morning, looking at not just the quarter, Will, but actually their year results up until the end of September, and they show that profits have reached £1.9 billion, with revenues in the same period climbing 30%. And what bosses are saying is that, it's summer, it's British holiday makers who had been desperate to get some sun. Of course, we were locked down for a couple of years, and it was a booming summer. In fact, it was a record-breaking summer for them with the amount of passengers. I believe they had over 100 million passengers, and they also expanded the amount of areas that they cover across Europe, and they do tend to go into the Middle East slightly and also to at least the north of Africa. So it's been absolutely phenomenal for them, particularly as it comes at a time when we know that summer was quite disruptive for several reasons. Firstly, we had significant issues with air traffic control in the UK for several days. Air traffic control was down, thousands of flights were cancelled, tens of thousands of passengers had their holidays disrupted. That was that. And then, of course, we had extreme weather across Europe, extreme wet weather in some circumstances, extreme heat in others, which led to wildfires. Of course, with the wildfires, there are lots of evacuations. So it hasn't been the best backdrop for the airline sector. But I think the fact that Ryanair have delivered these extraordinary numbers shows that perhaps it can be back up and running to the kind of pre-COVID-19 times that we were all used to.
Yeah, definitely showing some form of, strong resilience there, Juliana. So how are markets reacting to this news, and what are investors eyeing on the first trading day of the week?
Yeah, well, the UK blue chip index is in positive territory at intraday. Lots of this has got to do with Ryanair's extraordinary results. That's had a knock-on effect on the travel sector. So we can see lots of the budget airlines as well as holiday sites like TUI, they've all been lifted at intraday, and that's lifted the UK blue chip index. So the all share at intraday is actually in negative territory, even though there was positive. I've got to mention the negative. The negative in Will, which leads to Friday's GDP day, are the PMI data. We have had PMI data looking at manufacturing, construction and services. Not great, all down, and we've been seeing successive downfalls on PMI for the past few months. We know that there is a benchmark for 50. Anything that comes below 50 shows that there's been significant output, and there is significant a drop in output, which is why, despite the lifting of airlines, the all share is down. It's down at intraday by 0.18%. The FTSE 100 down to Will at 0.12%. The FTSE 250 down as well at 0.38%. However, this has had a knock-on effect on the British pound, so it's rallying at intraday. It's currently up against the US dollar by 0.31%, up to against the euro by 0.10%. And also the British pound is trading up against the Japanese yen by 0.45%. Worth mentioning, Will, not Innie, that we do get GDP data on Friday from the Office for National Statistics, giving us a rear view look at what the economy was like in September. So the negative PMI data, which is weighed on the FTSE, not great. We're expecting a 0.1% contraction, but it could be far worse than that.
We do hope it's not worse than that, Juliana. And you did mention about that. PMI, what's good for the goose might not be good for the gander, especially with the numbers coming out from the markets. One gained, one loses. But thank you, Juliana, for sharing those updates and insights.
Thank you. Thanks.
Now we go over to the EU, where Germany's Volkswagen used to be the world's biggest car maker, and not too long ago. But for a few years now, the company is in crisis, and now management announced new measures to help change course. Lars Alter joins us from Berlin. Lars, what can you tell us about the current situation at Volkswagen?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Will. Volkswagen has been in almost a free fall for years now. Last year, they sold 8.5 million cars. It was 11 million in 2019. Every single year for the past 4 years, the number of cars sold has been declining. And looking at the company's valuation, it currently sits at 56 billion euros. That is far below the value shareholders are giving the company's sports car subsidiary Porsche. It is also less than Mercedes-Benz and BMW. It is less than Asian competitors Toyota and BYD. And of course, it is way less than Tesla, sitting at 690 billion euros. That is 12 times the valuation of VW. value. Now, Tesla, of course, may be a different story, but the comparison to other classic brands, including those German competitors, must really hurt. So what is the company doing? For now, they're trying to cut costs. There will be no more hires. The plan is to lower costs by 10 billion euros until 2026. And another goal is to improve margins. They're at 3.4% for the first 9 months of the year, meaning that for every 100 euros Volkswagen takes in, only 3.40 euros is actually profit. And that number is expected to almost double, at least according to management.
How did Volkswagen get into this position, and what will be the way out?
Well, Volkswagen dropped the ball in China. It's as easy as that. For years, Volkswagen had been growing its business there, selling more cars there than any other brand in the world. And then they didn't realize how the market was changing, how it quickly moved towards e-mobility, and how software played a more important role to Chinese customers than the power of the combustion engine. BYD came along, developed new cars from scratch, and took over the market. And now the solution to the company's problems has to include China, of course, and specifically the EV sector. Whereas Volkswagen has put most of its effort into the ID.3 model, the company now wants to grow much broader in the segment, bringing some established combustion engine models like the Golf and the Tiguan into the electric fold. The idea is to dominate a relatively young segment with old names with a history, names that grab customers' attention. Also, VW wants to focus on what they're doing best, and that is cars. In the past, they tried to develop software to rival some of the largest tech companies in the world, and now the plan is to rather cooperate with companies including Apple and Google and not to go against them. Behind the scenes, many are optimistic for the new management to succeed with a turnaround. However, the goals are lofty. Volkswagen wants to sell 13 to 14 million cars annually by the end of the decade, and they'll definitely have their work cut out for them.
And Laz, we will not leave this conversation without talking about the markets. What are investors looking at in today's market?
Yeah, first indicators out of Asia were looking pretty good this morning. That is, of course, after that rally we saw on Wall Street on Friday. That was after some economic data, the U.S. showing slower jobs and wage growth than expected, and that reduced expectations of further U.S. interest rate hikes. And then there's China. Very interesting data out there this morning. The country has recorded its first ever quarterly deficit in foreign direct investment. It stands at a negative $12 billion roundabout, and it means that for the first time ever, foreign companies have invested less in China than they took out by, for example, repatriating profits from China. It's all a sign of Western governments' efforts to de-risk from China. That is something EU governments in particular were talking about a lot in recent months, and now it looks like it's happening.
Thanks so much, Laz Alter. Thank you so much for that update. Now we move on to South Africa now, where the Deputy Minister of Public Enterprises, Obed Bapela, says Africa is not taking full advantage of the opportunities presented by the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA. Bapela was speaking on the sidelines of the just concluded 2023 AGOA Forum in Johannesburg. Our South Africa correspondent, Innocent Samosa, with the details.
Well, entrepreneurship is vitally important for every economy. In fact, it is the backbone of every country, but they often face many challenges. Here in the African continent, entrepreneurs are telling me that moving goods from one place to the other, it's often difficult and expensive. I had the opportunity to speak to some of them here. Take a listen to what they had to say.
It's expensive. Freighting is expensive. That is one major problem we are having. And our packaging is also a problem, because we don't have a very solid packaging, because they are very expensive.
The challenge I face is expensive. It's expensive, and even as we entered here, they disturbed us a little, because we came in from the airport, so they have to disturb us.
South Africa is a bit over many African nations, so if you manufacture in South Africa like we do, it's very difficult to export to African nations. Okay, but if you manufacture in Nigeria, it's a little easier. Okay, then you have duties.
South Africa's Deputy Minister of Public Enterprises, Obed Bapela, claims that Africa is not taking advantage of AGOA for this reason.
Not as much, but it's because of colonization, what it did to us. First, by destroying our mind and feeding us with inferior education. And then as a result, we are sitting with endowment. All minerals that you see to being in demand everywhere in the world, you get them in Africa. And we extract them only to the ports, and then they go and finish the goods that they produce out of the minerals. And we are then the biggest consumers of those finished goods. So education, therefore, is where we ought to really alter.
Some entrepreneurs, on the other hand, established few contacts.
Yeah, the first day we got here, people started patronizing us, and it's moving very well. Yes. Yeah, I'm so happy, and I'm glad I attended Agua. I'm so happy.
Oh yes, people are coming. People are asking. They want to collaborate. They want us to enter into business. So we are looking at a meeting tomorrow.
According to Obed Babela, there's hope for the continent.
Well, look here, there's hope with this Africa Free Trade Continental Agreement. It's taking us somewhere. 44 countries acceded to it. Now they are looking at barriers. We have free duties and no duties.
President Cyril Ramaphosa said he's lobbying for a greater inclusion of small businesses into AGOA. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Samos, Channels Television News.
Many challenges Africans face when it comes to entrepreneurship in Africa. So coming up, Fitch upgrades Ghana's ratings. That conversation next. This is Business Incorporated. Thanks for staying with us. Last week, Fitch Ratings upgraded Ghana's long-term local currency issuer default rating IDR to CCC from RD. Fitch also affirmed Ghana's long-term foreign currency IDR at RD and the country's ceiling at B negative. The upgrade of Ghana's long-term local currency IDR follows the completion of the domestic debt exchange program. Professor John Gatsi, Dean, School of Business, University of Cape Coast in Accra, Ghana, joins us virtually. Good afternoon, Prof. Prof, not long ago, Fitch downgraded Ghana's credit rating, and now we're seeing it backtracking, upgrading the country's local and foreign IDR to CCC. Looking at the many of the reasons as cited, it cited the domestic debt exchange, the completion of that, and the sizable debt service reduction. But moving it from RD to CCC doesn't mean that Ghana is out of the woods, is it, in terms of defaults?
Yeah, that is true. But what Fitch is doing is to just indicate that the debt repayment burden on Ghana has reduced by the extent of the success of the domestic debt exchange program. So that is the reason why they are giving it this kind of rating. But in the whole architecture of debt management, it does not change anything. When the new structured debt was to be paid some few months ago, there was some struggle in terms of raising money to pay the creditors. So which means that even the debt exchange program that has been successfully announced, the payment obligation on government is still a problem. And that is the reason why we may not see any significant upgrade in terms of the Fitch rating.
Okay, so talking about this debt and the reduction in the debt, the IMF did say that in its 2022 report says that Ghana, the debt service represented 117% of its revenue. What is, in your opinion, do you see Ghana making a recovery in terms of how much it's going to bring in terms of inflows into the country to be able to outweigh the debt the mounting debt that it is facing?
I think we will see the recovery in so many years. It is not possible to see a change over time. Even within the restructured debt, our largest consumer of our revenue is still interest on debt, followed by compensation for workers. And these two items are competing against capital expenditure and goods and services. So that structure is still the same. And if we want to look at the fiscal indicators as provided by the IMF, then it will take a long time to get there.
What about the banks? Now I think their borrowing costs to customers at 38%, or is it the interbank rates? What's the current situation with banks as regards borrowing, the cost of borrowing?
Well, what is happening is that the bank are actually producing non-performing loans. They are producing people who eventually will not pay because of the high cost. So that is why we have started seeing high non-performing loan record of the bank or the banks as reported by the Bank of Ghana. And we also going to see a number of people who have taken loan earlier on finding it difficult to pay. So if we are not careful, the non-performing loan structure of the banking system will escalate, and that will have effect on capital, and that will have effect on liquidity. And the problem is aggravated because we are in an era where the Bank of Ghana is calling on the commercial banks to provide extra capital to meet the minimum capital, the new minimum capital that they want to set. And at the same time, you have something that is eating the capital that we call the non-performing loan. So the situation is just difficult to handle, but we hope with some time given, maybe it may ease out.
How do you see this looking out for the next inflation data that is expected? How do you see this impacting inflation, or what are your inflation projections for the country?
Well, inflation has inched down somehow from 54% to 38.1%. That is not enough. That has not reflected in prices in the country. So we are only hoping that the major indicators that disturb inflation will not occur. If we have our fuel prices, energy costs remain the same or somehow stable over a period of time, then we may see inflation going down further.
Thank you so much, Professor John Gatsi, Dean, School of Business, University of Cape Coast, Accra in Ghana. Thank you for sharing your perspective on Business Incorporated.
Thank you.
Now, still in Ghana, the country says it plans to assist Sao Tome with port operations. According to the Minister of Transport, the country would leverage its experience in port operations to assist Sao Tome with port infrastructure through the use of Ghana's ports. He said the two countries had successfully implemented another agreement in the aviation sector, for which the agreement had been renewed for another 5 or 7 years. Now, Zambia's central bank has raised the ratio of deposits that commercial lenders must hold in a bid to reverse a slide in the world's worst-performing currency after Argentina's peso. The Bank of Zambia will increase the statutory reserve ratio requirement for local and foreign currency deposits by 3% to 14.5% with effect from November the 13th. The bank says the move is aimed at relieving persistent foreign exchange market pressure and reining in inflation. Now in Uganda, the open tender system used by Ugandan companies to buy petroleum products from Kenya is in its final days as Energy Minister tabled the Petroleum Supply Amendment Bill 2023 in the Parliament, seeking to empower government-owned Uganda National Oil Company to take over the supply of oil. Meanwhile, the government has met with over 40 fuel companies under the Sustainable Energies and Petroleum Association to discuss a cabinet resolution on the importation of refined petroleum and related products. And that's it on Business Incorporated. Thanks for watching. I'm Will Ibong, and I'll see you tomorrow.